Roadie and the Horn podcast. My name, as always, is Donovan, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Ryan. Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well today, Donnie. Obviously, we are just kind of finishing up 2020 right now, so definitely excited to talk about some sports, obviously, that we'll get into, and then kind of some recap of things that happened in this year because it was an interesting year. But yeah, no, I'm doing well. Excited to get into it as always.
Yeah, definitely an interesting year. There's really there's no one word to encapsulate how 2020 has been, whether that's normal, just everyday things, or it's sports related. But yeah, I think it's wonderful that we got through this year without too much chaos, and that's a big dub for everybody. I think.
Yeah, I guess. And there was also a lot of chaos. There was definitely a lot of
I mean,
things
I
that
mean,
happened this year that I never
us
anticipated.
personally. Us personally, we didn't deal with as much chaos as other people. I think that's
That
that's
is true.
probably a win. That's probably a win for 2020.
It's a fair
Honestly,
assessment.
as sad as it may sound, I think us not getting into trouble is a big dub in itself.
Yeah, that's fair. Very, very fortunate for my health, right now, obviously. So, yeah, but there's been a lot of weird stuff. So, I'm excited to get into recapping some of the weirder stuff that happened this year. But yeah, I mean, definitely want to start off with some sports in this pod as we do. But we can start off in the MLB this episode. The San Diego Padres are making moves that we've seen, kind of slowly developing the MLB offseason. We're still waiting on a lot of free agents. Some of the top guys yet to sign. But San Diego Padres, Donnie, a team in the NL West, they're trying to compete with the Dodgers out there. They make a few trades this week for pitchers. They acquire Yu Darvish and Blake Snell from the Cubs and Rays, respectively. So definitely want to hear some of your thoughts on those moves and where you think the Padres now stack up in the NL.
Yeah, I don't know if it necessarily makes them any better in terms of like an outlook, in terms of like tier ranking them or whatever. I would still say they're probably a tier two NL team behind the Dodgers, who are I'd say maybe the only tier one NL team at this point. Um, but yeah, it's an interesting thought to see them not only go for Blake Snell, but also Yu Darvish, who is a little bit less what you would expect the Padres to want, considering their I don't know what the exact word is, maybe like a timeline. I don't know if Yu Darvish necessarily fits the timeline. Obviously, Clevenger's out, um, and you don't necessarily know what you're getting out of Darvish in the first place too, which is always a question mark considering you're either going to get lights out Cy Young Darvish like we saw last year, or it's just going to be a train wreck. It really depends. You don't ever get like an average season out of him. Like it's either going to be great or awful. But yeah, I think it's really interesting to see them. Um, maybe not necessarily mortgaging the future, but setting a lot of different assets to pick up pitchers who may or may not make them a contender out in the NL. I think they're already a contender as is, I would say. So obviously these trades make them better, but I would have focused a little bit more on the offensive side of things to pair with Tatis and Machado, get another asset. But things are definitely not done here, so we'll see what happens the next couple of weeks, months. Obviously, with MLB free agency, it's the only one you have to talk about on the long term because you really have no idea what's happening or what the timeline is. But yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting move for the Padres to make. Um, Basically, letting their nuts hang a little bit, showing what they're made of here.
Yeah, that's for sure. You mentioned kind of that timeline of how Darvish kind of overlaps. He signed that big deal with the Cubs back in 2018, right before that season started. It was kind of like a last minute decision that Theo and the Cubs made to add another arm in their rotation. And he's still signed until 2023 at around $20 million a year per season. So definitely still a big contract that he has. Darvish, 34 years old right now. So definitely a win now type move for the Padres. You mentioned the prospect pool, but the Padres for the last couple of years have had one of the best prospect pools in baseball. So now we see them using some of those future assets for current assets. Obviously, trading for two guys that they will be able to use out of their starting rotation. That's for sure. Obviously, Blake Snell and Darvish, and then they also add Victor Caratini from the Cubs. So thought that was a decent add as well. I thought Caratini's been a pretty good player for them, backing up Wilson Contreras and coming in those situations. But yeah, pretty aggressive move from the Padres. Obviously, going very heavily all in. Definitely a win now type move coming off a season where they definitely showed a lot of signs of improvement in their ball club for sure. I know you mentioned that their offense could use a little bit of improvement, and I definitely agree with that. And you mentioned that you think you have the Dodgers in the top tier in the NL, and I would agree with that. I mean, the Dodgers have proven themselves 6 straight NL West championships, so they've definitely established themselves, and everybody else in the NL is trying to catch up for them. So I definitely can see why the Padres made these moves. They feel like they need to be aggressive to compete with the Dodgers.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I mean, it's like when you look at other teams in the division that have had similar trajectories, I'd say maybe the Rockies a couple of years ago looked like that team that could be the one that to potentially take over. Obviously, we saw the Rockies have a couple good years, game 163, all that jazz. Um, but yeah, the Padres are doing what the Rockies should have done. The Rockies are in a bad spot right now. They haven't done anything to let everybody go, whereas the Padres are consistently adding, consistently spending. Um, the one thing that does it will always boil down to the fact that they may or may not be able to keep up a long-term run if they trade up all these prospects. Obviously they've already moved a bunch of guys. If you're getting Snell and Darvish, you're moving um, maybe not tier A pieces, although there are some good pieces in there like Patino, like we talked about before the podcast. But even considering last year, they went off and made 7 different trades at the deadline to try to shore up their roster. It comes to a point where you're giving away pieces here and there that could potentially pan out. Obviously, with draft picks and everything, there are a lot of lottery picks. It's basically the you're throwing out numbers or whatever, hoping that they hit. But having more prospects obviously better than having less prospects. And the Padres, while they still have a good young core, they've got a lot of high end players still. I think baseball prospects is more about having depth and more about having guys that could potentially burst onto the scene. And as we talked about before, months ago at least, the Padres are building something special. However, they are still the Padres don't know how to win. They don't know how to make these like big. Obviously, you have to complete comebacks. You have to make big pushes. They did nothing in this year's playoffs, so the hope is that they can completely improve or whatever. But yeah, it looked like they were definitely outclassed by the Dodgers in the playoffs this year. Obviously, you got swept 3-0. It'll be interesting to see what they do moving forward.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. But I mean, I feel like they're building a pretty nice rotation. Obviously, these two moves, you had Darvish and Snell, but obviously last year they added Mike Clevenger right before the deadline, and obviously they still have Chris Paddock. So pretty good rotation now for the Padres. So they're putting themselves in a position where they could succeed, and now obviously they just got to prove it, like you're saying there. So should be interesting. Pretty nice moves there for the Padres. But yeah, as we're saying, we're still waiting on a lot of the big time free agents in MLB to sign guys like DJ LeMahieu, George Springer, guys like that. We're still waiting on. So then definitely a regular MLB offseason, I would say, Donnie, in terms of it being very slow in terms of waiting for free agents to sign.
Yeah, I think it's brutal. Um, I don't know what they would do necessarily, but I think it's about time the MLB looks at their free agency process or just does something with their offseason process to try to speed things up or make things exciting. Because let's just be realistic here. It's like your free agency right now is probably tweeting at Trevor Bauer and telling him, "Hey, sign with my team." That's basically everybody's free agency right now, and that's really not what we're looking for. Um, Especially because we've got all-star potential players left and right. It's like George Springer sitting out there. Nobody says anything about him. JT Realmuto sitting out there. Haven't really heard anything about him. Marcell Ozuna is a very, very good offensive player. Haven't heard anything about him. There's all these rumors and everything, but we really haven't had. There's no concrete anything from this MLB offseason, I feel like.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I know we talked on our podcast a few episodes ago with our friend Dan about the idea that we still don't know if the DH is going to be in the NL or not. So that affects a player like Marcell Ozuna or even Nelson Cruz, who's still a free agent. So a lot of uncertainty in baseball, but we'll definitely come up and bring up the news when that does happen. So definitely wanted to start there with MLB. But yeah, Donnie, we had some interesting news at the NBA as well relating to James Harden. I think I'll let you kind of share the news on that one.
Yeah, James Harden says, "Hey, I'm going to a party. I don't care about anything." After having, I'd say weeks, maybe months of speculation about wanting a trade or wanting out, he has decided basically that he's going rogue and he controls his own destiny, which I think has been how it was with the Rockets. Regardless, he kind of runs the show. But yeah, he was photographed at a private party. Uh, Obviously, with COVID, you're supposed to be walking around, you're supposed to be wearing a mask, you're supposed to be social distancing. He was not social distancing. He was not wearing a mask. He was not doing anything of the sort. He got fined a little bit of money and got criticized by just about everybody in sports media, which is reasonable at this point. Um, I, I I have a really really tough time with this because it seems like people with money, especially, just feel like this doesn't matter to them. Like COVID doesn't matter, it doesn't affect them. Whereas if James Harden got COVID, it could end up like we've seen in other sports, like Eduardo Rodriguez, for example. He had to sit out the entire year because he had a defect that came up from COVID. It's like if James Harden ended up getting a heart issue or something from getting COVID, that would really that would derail his career. That would alter the future of basketball in general. And not to mention, like, he probably has family members that he sees every day. He probably goes around and sees his friends, and obviously that's not necessarily the safest for his teammates. Um, but yeah, I think we've seen this over and time again in different sports, whether it's the Cardinals pitchers or certain examples of that in different sports of players not being able to stay out, like Lou Williams. Um, but yeah, James Harden decided, hey, I'm going to a private party. I don't care what you think, and he's getting slaughtered on the internet for it, and he's really costing the Rockets first off their health, because they had to skip postpone a couple games, but he's also costing himself a chance at like actually getting the trade that he's looking for. I would think that it's not very easy to trade for a player that doesn't want to follow the rules and restrictions that he put on him from COVID and such.
Yeah, definitely an interesting situation. Harden was fined $50,000 and was forced to quarantine in that. Harden did play in the 2 games the Rockets have played so far, averaging 39 points. So did kind of let it up, but the Rockets are 0-2 to start the year. So yeah, not the start the Rockets were looking for. Obviously, they just traded Russell Westbrook before the year as well. So it seems like it might be kind of a tough year for the Rockets. But we've seen some other games go on. Obviously, NBA just kind of starting up. Anything you've seen from the LA Lakers or anybody else you want to highlight so far out of the NBA, Donnie?
You know, nothing necessarily out of the Lakers. I just want to give props to the Portland Trailblazers for the other night. That Portland team is a grind 'em out basketball team for sure. I think they won by 8. The Lakers definitely hung around for a while, but I still think Damian Lillard is underrated. I still think Damian Lillard doesn't get enough credit that he deserves. I think he put up 30, maybe 31 against the Lakers, which is the Lakers do let up high scores sometimes, but usually they win those games. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't necessarily seen a whole lot. It's like when you've got teams like Orlando leading the conference at 4-0, you're thinking, yeah, this is probably not going to last. We're still waiting for a bigger sample size and everything, but um, yeah, at this point, the leaders of the conferences are the Orlando Magic and the Phoenix Suns, and if that happens the rest of the year, we'll really talk about that. We'll be shocked. This will be a historic NBA season, but I'm thinking probably not. Probably not possible here at this point.
Yeah, definitely interesting. The Clippers, they're another team who's right up there in the West with the Blazers so far this year, and they already had a loss where they lost by 51 to the Dallas Mavericks. So, I mean, we'll see what's going on. That was kind of an interesting game. Kawhi was out for that game, but doesn't seem like that's too serious of an injury. But yeah, obviously very early on in the NBA so far, so that's been interesting. It seems like the NBA season just ended, and we're already back in regular season, as we've been saying. So that's nice. Will be good to follow that out of the NBA. But I think with that, we can kind of shift over now to some football thoughts. Obviously, we're heading into Week 17 in the NFL, so ready for playoff action. So that should be really nice. Not as crazy a Week 17 as maybe we could have thought. Seems like there's still a lot to be had in terms of seeding and who gets in the playoffs. But some of the interesting games I want to highlight this Sunday, starting with the Packers and the Bears. So Green Bay still fighting for that top seed in the NFC overall, and Chicago competing. If they win, they will get one of the last wild card spots in the NFC. So that should be an interesting game. Green Bay usually has the Bears number when they try, so we'll see if Aaron Rodgers is able to knock the Bears out of the playoffs yet again. But that one should be interesting. And then one other game I want to highlight is the Cardinals and the Rams. So obviously these two teams kind of fighting in the NFC wildcard spot. Obviously Seattle just locked up the NFC West already. And the Rams, bad news for them. They're going to be without Jared Goff and Cooper Kupp for this game against the Cardinals. So that should be an interesting matchup out of the NFC West. But yeah, Donnie, any thoughts on other games that we may be seeing this weekend in Week 17?
Yeah, the NFC East will be going down to an either 6 or 7 win team winning the division. Obviously, the Cowboys and the Giants play, and then the Washington football team plays Philadelphia at night. Somehow the Eagles are still getting primetime placement. Not because of them, obviously, but because of Washington being in prime position to win the division. Um, but other than that, not a whole lot really. There's only one interesting statistic that I saw this week, or one interesting fact. Um, Patrick Mahomes was the MVP favorite all season until Week 16, and now Aaron Rodgers is now the MVP favorite via sports books and betting sites and such. which is really interesting to me considering his team just drafted a quarterback not 6 months ago, 7 months ago, and now at 37 or 38, I don't know how old Aaron Rodgers is at this point. Um, but Aaron Rodgers is now your MVP favorite. I think that's shocking to think about, considering how old he is and how people were considering or saying that he is a little bit over the hill. He has put all of those rumors and all of those words to rest.
Yeah, I mean, both Rodgers and Mahomes have had insane years. I think either one of them can win MVP. Rodgers has 44 touchdowns and 5 picks. I mean, that's just insane. Both of them have
Yeah,
over
like give me a
4,000
break
yards.
on that. They drafted a quarterback.
Yeah.
Like think about that.
They traded up for Jordan Love, too. They traded up for the quarterback. Rodgers
Yeah,
has that insane year. So, no, they looked really good. Devontae Adams had an unbelievable game over the weekend as well. He's got 17 touchdowns this year. Just an incredible year for him.
It's ridiculous. It's actually ridiculous to watch just how talented. Because it's like I feel like Devontae Adams has always been that receiver. It's like, oh, we know what he's capable of. We know what his potential is. And now he's really decided, hey, this is my year. This is my time. Now is my time.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's been dominant. Rodgers loves throwing the football. He's a great route runner, so he's had a great year for Green Bay as well. I'm still on that train that I think Green Bay and Kansas City are going to meet in the Super Bowl. So maybe whoever wins MVP between them, hopefully that we get to see a real game between them in the Super Bowl. That could really decide bragging rights between Mahomes and Rodgers this year. I would love to see that matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked. I think you've been calling it for how long now? It's been months that you've been saying, you think in Green Bay and Kansas City, and now it could very well come to fruition. Green Bay's actually got a half decent defense, and obviously their offense is top tier, maybe the best in the league in terms of point performance and all that. I don't know. I think it's really interesting to see just how good the Packers are after, they may have been able to have been even better had they drafted somebody. That's something that we can talk about for months and months and months now. But yeah, I think Green Bay versus Kansas City sounds like the plan at this point.
Yeah, no question. And I think while you kind of brought that up, imagine if we threw one of those other stud receivers in this draft, like a guy like T. Higgins or Michael Pittman, two guys for the Bengals and Colts respectively. If you add them to the Packers offense instead of that Jordan Love pick, imagine where they would be. But even still, Packers looking really good. So, as I said, they play the Bears this Sunday. Could lock up the 1 seed in the NFC. Donnie, earlier you mentioned that Eagles game. Yeah, I was stunned when I was watching the Sunday Night Football game, and I saw that the Eagles and Washington were going to be playing again on prime time. So, I mean, yeah, we'll see. Maybe Jalen Hurts can pull something out, save it for either the Giants or Cowboys, whoever ends up winning that game. But yeah, should be interesting. At the very worst, hopefully the Eagles can get a top 5 pick. So we'll see. They're kind of in that range right now. I believe they would be picking 6. So obviously coming off a loss to Dallas. So that was interesting. Last note I have out of the NFL before we get into some of our tiers and recapping 2020 overall. Josh McDaniels, I just have to say something to Josh McDaniels right now. There was a quote this week that I saw on Twitter, and he said, "I'd love to have head coaching opportunities present itself." And it's like, man, first of all, literally you were a head coach with the Broncos and it didn't work out. And then you got fired and went back to New England. And then you were gonna go to Indianapolis when the year they hired Frank Reich. And then you kind of were just like, nah, actually last minute I'm staying with the Patriots because they're gonna raise my salary. So I mean, you've had those head coaching opportunities present themselves before. I just thought that was kind of funny to hear him say that, but. Yeah, I mean, Josh McDaniels, I definitely think he will get consideration for a lot of these head coaching jobs. Obviously, had done so good for the Patriots for so long when he worked with Tom Brady. Not as good a year this year with Cam Newton, but obviously, I mean, the Patriots roster, their skill players, not among the best. Obviously, I mean, Jacoby Myers is all right. Demir Bird, they're okay. But yeah, obviously, the receivers are not too great in New England. So that provides a little bit of context. But yeah, just wanted to bring that up about Josh McDaniels. I mean, you've literally been a head coach and declined an opportunity to be a head coach for a pretty good organization with the Colts. So I don't know what he's thinking with that.
I don't want to hear it anymore from him. It's like we all know what's happening. He's going to take over in New England after Belichick retires or leaves or does whatever he does. Like, stop acting like you're trying to fool people. Like, we know what's happening. We know what you're capable of. We know what's going on here.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right, good stuff out of some of the pro sports leagues that we saw this past week. Kind of just goes over our regular news recap and things like that. But big part of this podcast, obviously 2020 coming to an end this week. So for some people, hopefully that's very good news. You don't want to think about it again, but we're going to kind of recap some of the things that we saw this year because there were a lot of weird stuff that happened in this year, obviously. So We're going to start, just go over some top tiers of things that happened in 2020. We're going to start with just crazy moments. So we're just going to talk about random shit that happened this year and remember when that happened, kind of that stuff. So I'll start with this one. I want to start with the Milwaukee Bucks protest that we saw in late August. Obviously, that was just an insane event. The fact that an NBA team, before a playoff game in a bubble, decided, you know what, we're not playing today in response to some of the greater events that happened in this country after the shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha. So that was definitely a remember where you were at moment. I remember being on Twitter. Donnie and I were about to record a podcast. We did end up recording a podcast right after that, but I just remember being on Twitter for like an hour just in shock of kind of the fallout of that event. But what are some of the things you remember about that day, Donnie? And I guess obviously we recorded a podcast right after that, but as you reflect back on that decision from the Bucks back in August.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think it's just strange to see an NBA team taking charge and really taking over the news. You don't often see, especially a team out of Milwaukee. It's like, what do you hear about out of Milwaukee that ever really goes like viral? It's like um, the countrywide. They're taking the first initiative here. Usually, Milwaukee's more sleepy and quiet. I feel like, um, but yeah, it's really interesting to see just where we've been in 2020. Obviously, the progress that has been made is it's nice and all. Um, but again, I think the whole Black Lives Matter thing has been swept under the rug for other issues. The last couple of months, obviously, with the presidential election and all that. It's very interesting to see just like where we're at right now. Obviously, you'd like to see more change. You'd like to see more positive growth and everything. And while these moments come out as crazy and interesting to look at, what have we really gained? And I don't necessarily know if there's been that type of gain, which is I think maybe the craziest thing of all is we've had a major event like this happen after these major events happening in the past, and it's like we still haven't really gained anything from it, in terms of like growth as human beings, maybe.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying there, and I thought you brought up a good point that it came from the Milwaukee Bucks, kind of like an interesting organization for it to come from, but it really did come from the players in the locker room, which is something that definitely sticks with me as I think back to this. It wasn't the ownership, it wasn't the coaching staff, it wasn't anybody else that said that the Bucks weren't going to play. It was the players in the locker room who. Some of which had prior experiences with the police, bad experiences. We talked about Sterling Brown in that podcast about some of the run-ins that he's had, and I really like the fact that the Bucks players were able to get phone calls and with legislation during that time that they were supposed to play. So that just felt like such a significant event. The fact that an NBA team was not playing a playoff game because of police brutality and a shooting. So yeah, that was just an insane moment that I definitely wanted to bring up at the start when I thought about crazy moments that happened this year. But yeah, I'll go over you, Donnie. You want to bring up another crazy event that happened this year?
I don't know. I think we can. In general, I think we've seen a couple very, very interesting, I don't know, runs and everything. But I'll say for me, the craziest moment in sports, for 2020 is just the whole our whole Dodgers season. I'd say, starting with obviously adding Mookie Betts and David Price, and then David Price says, "Hey, I'm not playing this year. That's not happening." Um, which is quite interesting to think about, considering you know David Price has not been necessarily on the best terms with the MLB. I think people are not the biggest fan of David Price. But he made a very commendable decision to, hey, COVID's bad. I'm not going to play, which is fine. And then so the Dodgers go into a season. Nobody knows what's happening. They haven't had some of the guys that have been helpful in their runs the last couple of years, like Ryu, for example. And then they pull off a very, very good season. It's everybody's still saying, oh, teams like the Padres or the Braves could beat them, and then the Dodgers overcome adversity multiple times, down in multiple series, especially that Braves series, which was just ridiculous. And then obviously Cody Bellinger comes up in Game 7 and tanks one to take the lead, which is something that you don't usually see. And then obviously the World Series was just insane. It's like we have 3 errors on a play to give the Rays a win, and then you get to Game 7, and you've got Julio Urias, who is a starter who's maybe not super consistent, closing out the World Series in a spot where in previous years I think Clayton Kershaw would have been the guy that is coming in the game, or Kenley Jansen, either or. But yeah, I think just in general the MLB season, you have a 60-game regular season, which is shockingly short. I don't think we'll see a season like that for a long time. And then you see a team that hasn't won in decades winning the World Series. in front of a 6 or 7 thousand fan crowd. Um, I think it just sums up the season in general. It sums up 2020 in general for sports.
Yeah, no question. Especially the fact that the World Series was in Texas. Like we had a Rays Dodgers World Series in Texas. Like that was just kind of weird as well. To see that at a neutral site, obviously. But yeah, I mean the Dodgers team in general, you brought up like so much talent. You talked about the ad with Mookie Betts, but it just seemed like they had such incredible depth, such a great lineup, great pitching staff that it was kind of only a matter of time. Obviously, the Dodgers they had been to the World Series a couple of times in the past, recent years with that kind of core, and they were finally able to break through over the Rays. But yeah, even just kind of reflecting on the MLB season as a whole, like it was so strange, especially because that was the first league to come back with the kind of coronavirus impact. And we saw teams like the Marlins get it first. And then the Cardinals were forced to play this insane schedule at the end of the year where they had to play more games than days available for like a little over a month in that span. So a lot of cool events out of the MLB that we saw. Maybe they didn't handle it the best. Donnie and I were definitely critical during that time of some of the decisions that the MLB made, but they got through it. They were able to award a championship. So I think all things considered, definitely have to respect a lot of the sports leagues that were able to come back, and especially the MLB as they were the first one.
Yeah, when the Marlins are throwing out 9 or 10 guys that they have just signed, like in the last three or 4 days that tested negative, it's like that's how you know things are weird. They literally had players on the roster that hadn't played in baseball, or hadn't played professional baseball ever. They hadn't been in the MLB ever. They'd been in Double A or Triple A, and they just got signed for their first appearance in the league. And, it's a weird year. It's been a really really strange year. But when they tell you, "Oh, don't rule it out" or whatever, you really can't rule anything out in sports. I think we've established that at this point. You really can't rule anything out.
Yeah, no question. A good event there to bring up, kind of the Dodgers and MLB coming back. I want to shift over another event that we can switch over to now. Kind of really the start of it all. I'm going back to middle of March, March 12th, the day when March Madness was canceled. I think that was really a big day for me. It's just kind of like a whoa, like maybe this thing is actually pretty serious, and everything just kind of got put on pause. Everybody just kind of felt like hit in the mouth, and we're like, I don't really know what happened, but that was the same time that the NBA got put on pause after Rudy Gobert tested positive. That was definitely a big domino, and then obviously March Madness getting canceled. We were right in conference tournaments. Those were just kind of starting up. Even the Big East, there was a game that happened right around then, and then that had to get kind of nipped mid-game. So that was really interesting. But yeah, that was definitely a big shock to everybody. Definitely will remember that time right at the start of coronavirus, that panic, and like, wow, maybe we're not getting sports for a little while. I even remember, like, I think like a night before I was watching NHL games kind of come to an end. I was like, man, I don't know when the next time I'll be able to watch hockey was. Turns out it was a couple of months. But yeah, just kind of reflecting back on the middle of March and everything kind of getting put on pause. That was something that I hopefully never happens again. I never thought I would witness something like that, but yeah, that was just an insane thing to reflect back on.
Yeah, the Rudy Gobert grabbing the mics moment is something that you'll really never forget. I'm sure he feels bad about that in general at this point. But yeah, it was weird, especially because when that moment happened, I was sitting in the arena waiting for Avs Rangers. It was pregame, and you're seeing all these things, speculation and all that. You're seeing the Jazz, they don't come out in the court. They have somebody test positive. It comes out later that Jordan Clarkson and other players have no idea who's tested positive. They don't know who's sick. Everybody's just sitting in the locker room, hasn't moved. Nobody's done anything because obviously at that point we had no idea how to deal with these things. We didn't know what to do. We didn't have testing. We didn't have anything like that. Other countries did. We were still a little bit lacking. But yeah, it's really weird, especially when you're sitting in a professional sports arena and people are talking about, oh, is this game gonna go on? Are we gonna play this game? Is this gonna end up happening? Um, and obviously it did end up happening. It was a good game, but the reality of things is, I was at the last hockey game that had fans and everything, and the vibe is still eerily similar. It's like people really don't know what's going on still to this point, and we are now 9 months later with COVID in sports, and we're still talking about how it may be dangerous to be playing these sports, may be dangerous to be playing games, and I think that encapsulates 2020 in itself, and just like the panic is ever apparent and always there.
Yeah, no question on that. Yeah, like you say, like we hope that it would be better by now, and maybe it is a little bit. Like we're starting to get a little bit of a vaccine, but yeah, there's still definitely a lot of uncertainty on that, and Yeah, I mean, optimistic that things will be getting better and we can kind of flush it. But I just want to bring up one more event that happened. This one is kind of a more of a personal note for me, just kind of a week that I had in early January, so before COVID. So there was like a stretch of, I think it was either 7 or 8 days where I went to like 5 different sporting events. I went to a Blackhawks game at the United Center, and then I drove back to Iowa actually and worked a Rough Riders game, the team that I work for. And then right after that, I think that was a Saturday. The next Monday, my dad and I went to New Orleans for the national championship game between Clemson and LSU. That was an unbelievable game. Obviously, I'm a big LSU guy, as you guys know. So that was awesome to see Joe Burrow and LSU take down Clemson. Then immediately from New Orleans, I flew to Canada. I went to Ottawa, met up with Donnie and a couple other our friends. We went to Blackhawks and Senators. I literally got there late. It was like the start of the second period. The Hawks were down 2-0. They come back to win that game in overtime. Jonathan Toews had the winner in that game. So that was awesome. I literally just showed up and saw the Blackhawks come back. So that was really nice. And a few days later, we actually drove to New York and we went to a Rangers-Islanders game. So Donnie got to see his Rangers get a win at the Coliseum. So yeah, that was just an absurd week of going to games that were literally all over. Like I went to games in Illinois and Iowa and New Orleans and Canada and New York. So that was just an insane week that I had in early January before all this really hit. So definitely couldn't go without mentioning that. I don't know if I'll ever have a week quite like that where I go to games in a lot of different places. So definitely wanted to bring that up. Definitely a highlight for me this year.
Yeah, I mean, while you're in New Orleans, I'm on a plane from Colorado to Newark. I get in at night. We wake up 5 hours after we go to bed. We have to drive 2 hours into New York. And then we drive another 6 hours north to meet you in Ottawa. It's probably more like 7 hours. We had some definite issues getting to where we wanted to go. Um, you know, there's multiple reasons for that. We won't get into it, but yeah, just a really interesting stretch for you, interesting stretch for me, an interesting stretch for everybody. Obviously, we played hockey outside. That's something that I would very very much enjoy. I'd love to be able to play hockey with the boys again. Just fuck around, but at this point, it doesn't look like it's likely anytime soon. But yeah, I don't know. Just you had a week, everybody had a week, and now we've had a year. So it's been a real shit show for everybody.
Yeah, no question. That was a good time when we played hockey on Long Island after we got back. That was the day after the Rangers and Islanders game that day. So that was a ton of fun as well. Hopefully we get to do that again soon. But yeah, that's kind of how I reflect on that. That was a good time. Hang out with a good amount of our friends that Donnie and I talk to a lot. So hopefully we get one of those events. Not too long in the future in 2021. That would be really nice. But yeah, that kind of sums up my top moments and things that I reflect on in 2020. Any last notes from you, Donnie, before we get into our top albums of the year? I'm really excited for that one. But any last thoughts for you on top moments and things that happened this year?
Yeah, I just want people to remember. So I was in class mid March, and we were talking about COVID and if it was going to shut down school or whatever. And I had a professor tell me that school was not going to get shut down, everything's going to be fine. And then literally while we're sitting in class, 15 minutes after he said that, they moved everything to online, and they said everybody in a class should leave the class, should start going home or going to wherever they live. 15 minutes after he says that, it's like 4 p.m. on a Wednesday night, and I'm being told, nah, COVID, we're going to be fine. We haven't had any issues yet. And then literally within the class period, while I'm at school, we're told, hey, yeah, we're moving online classes, college classes online. Really just, I think that sums up 2020 in general. It's just total dysfunction. And, that's a great time.
That is a prime bad takes exposed moment right there.
Oh, it's an awful take exposed moment. Like, it's so sad. It really is. And obviously that professor is a good man. He's a very very nice human being, but man, he was really wrong. He was way off.
And I think that's something that I definitely took away from 2020. Maybe you think you know what's going on, but you really don't. Really nobody has any idea what anything.
You really just never know. I think nobody really knows what's going on most of the time, and that's fine. Like, that's okay.
I mean, hey, if we're all in the same boat, then if nobody knows what's going on, then it's an even playing field. So maybe that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. At that point, it's just like when you really just have no idea what's going on. It's fine. Like, it's okay.
Yeah, good stuff. All right. So one more tier. I was actually super excited this. I put this list together like a couple of weeks ago just in preparation for this. But our top tier of albums in the year 2020. So I think that was actually something that I was looking forward to because there was actually a good amount of music. There was a lot of albums that I really like. So I actually have a bunch in my top tier of albums. So I'll just kind of rattle them off here. Then Donnie and I we can have our conversation. Donnie will share his list. But here we go here. So my top tier of albums in the year 2020. So I'll start Lil Uzi Vert with Eternal Atake. Uzi was my top artist of the year on Spotify. I was a big fan of that album. Really good deluxe edition as well. I'll keep going. I've got a couple. 21 Savage, Savage Mode 2. I was a big fan of this album. 21 Savage, big fan. Kid Cudi, Man on the Moon 3. That album pretty recent, but I'm a big fan. Kid Cudi, Donnie knows. You can verify I listen to this album more than probably any other human realistically should, but I did. So Cudi's on there. I also have Juice WRLD with Legends Never Die. I was a big fan of this album. Even though, Juice, he's no longer with us, obviously, but I was a fan of that album. Gunna with Wanna. I was a big fan of this album. I'm actually a big Gunna fan, so shout out to him on that. Polo G with The GOAT. I was actually a big fan. I wasn't a huge Polo G guy before this year, but that album definitely got me on. Fan of that. Future's album, High Off Life. I like this album as well. Actually, not a huge Future guy. I like a lot of his like collabs, like when it's like Future and Drake or something like that. But I thought this was a pretty good solo Future album. I also have Nav with Good Intentions. Nav put out a couple albums this year, but Good Intentions was definitely my favorite of the two. And Drake, of course, Dark Late demo tapes. I mean, Drake, it wouldn't be a year without Drake putting out a fire album. I mean, Drake just, Drake's the GOAT, obviously. Drake just keeps putting them out. So there you go. Bunch of albums there, but that's my top tier of albums from this year. So yeah, Donnie, I'll shift it over to you.
Yeah, I'm definitely not as willing to put 17 different albums in my top tier.
How many do I have? I think I have 9. I couldn't decide. They're all good. I like them.
First off, I don't appreciate the fact that you left off a Mac Miller album.
I know.
Definitely disgusting.
I know, that's disrespect to the intro of this podcast, obviously.
Yeah, obviously Mac Miller's album, Circle is fantastic. Great listen, top to bottom if you want to go give it a listen if you haven't already. I will definitely agree with you. I like 21 Savage's album. I'm not a big 21 Savage fan. There's a couple songs in there, but I do think obviously he does well. He gets the good features on there too, so it's like you're always gonna have a couple bangers. Definitely, Drake. I would like to see him actually release an album, and not just a combination of songs that didn't make his albums. But even the combo of songs that didn't make his albums is still pretty fire. It's like obviously, you get different. If Drake gives you 17 different songs, it just out of nowhere randomly that don't really make any sense together, but still somehow find their way to work. And you really props to him. I'll give one more shout out to The Weeknd and obviously our good friend Brett. I think After Hours is a very, very successful in terms of what they were trying to do, in terms of what The Weeknd was trying to do. Obviously, he doesn't release much music, so them in general, Weeknd fans in general, are probably very, very fired up to have that. Obviously, when he comes out with 16 or 17 songs, you can't really complain. But yeah, other than that, I don't know if I'll necessarily give albums top tier status. I liked Eternal Take. It was a good album. More hit or miss for me. Kid Cudi's album, more hit or miss for me. But yeah, I think we got a lot of music, which probably not surprising, but we didn't get like the tier 1 artists releasing music for the most part. It's like we didn't get a real album out of J. Cole. Kanye didn't really do much this year.
Travis Scott as well. I could have used more.
Travis Scott literally did nothing except features. And maybe a song or two. But yeah, I don't know. It's very weird to consider everybody's stuck inside or everybody's quarantining, and we still didn't get albums from like Kendrick Lamar didn't do anything. Nothing happened with anybody with Kendrick Lamar. But yeah, music in general is just you would expect there to be the top tier of top tier this year because everybody's got more time to work on music. But I guess I'd say 2020 in general was a little bit slower than normal, maybe.
Yeah, I agree with that. There were definitely a lot of those like Spotify Fridays that I was looking for, especially that stretch we had with no sports. I mean, I was like, man, like just give me the Friday, give me some new music. So that was definitely something that was a focus of mine. As you said, one honorable mention for me, one that was really close to making it but did not for me, was Lil Baby's album, My Turn. I thought that was a pretty good album as well, but just missed out on my top tier. But yeah, fun conversation there. A lot of good music we got this year, so would definitely love to hear some of our listeners' top albums of the year as well. Definitely hit us up on social media at Roth Podcast, ROTH, Roadie on the Horn. That's what it means there, at Roth Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. Definitely let us know some of your top albums of the year. We'd love to give them a listen, talk about them. So yeah, good stuff there. 2020 recap, Donnie. 2020 in the books. Do you have any parting thoughts with this year?
Usually I'm like New Year's a little bit less, happy. I don't know. I'm just kind of indifferent about the new year. But this year, I think I'm pretty fired up to see 2020 go. It's just been top to bottom. It's just been a shit show. And I mean, it's like I guess I've enjoyed some of the fuckery, but like obviously it's been a very very negative year for a lot of us, and I'm looking forward to putting it behind us. Just in general, and moving forward, advancing ourselves as human beings.
Yeah, no question. There was just so much. There was so much stupidity in this year. There were so many things that happened in just these 12 months of 2020 that I never thought I was going to encounter in my entire life. And obviously, like, everybody went through this together. But there's a slight part of me that's just going to miss it. Like, there was so many times I was like, man,
right.
like, what? I don't understand how something like this could happen. Just like you were always on your toes. You never knew what was coming next. So like there's a slight part of me that's like, I don't know. Like I'm gonna kind of miss its stupidity in 2020. But I mean, in reality, I'm definitely excited to be moving on as well. Hopefully brighter days ahead, like we're saying. I mean, obviously that's an optimist way to look at things, but yeah, I mean, it's good stuff. I mean, 2020 for you, Donnie, you saw the Lakers and Dodgers win championships within a couple weeks of each other. I mean, you really can't complain about that.
Yeah, I mean, if we cut out like I don't know, like March until I don't know, like July, March until August, things would be a little bit better. But like we went for months without anything relevant happening in my life. It's like I felt like I was in school, I was sleeping, I was waking up, doing school stuff. I was sleeping, I was waking up, I was doing school stuff, and that was like a constant grind for months there. So I'm very glad that is no longer the lifestyle that I'm living. But I think it's your turn to close this one out. So it's all you here. I believe in you and in your ability.
Oh, thank you, Donnie. Obviously, I love the confidence. But yeah, obviously 2020 coming to an end. We had kind of a tough summer, as Donnie said, no sports. But hey, you know what? Like September, October, the last couple of months, we've had hella sports. I mean, NFL, obviously, NBA came back pretty quick. NHL starting up pretty soon. So, there's a little bit of reason to be optimistic here. So, definitely excited. Thank you all for making it through this this far in the podcast. Obviously, end of the podcast, folk. That's what this means. Usually we do listener questions. We just kind of wanted to do a recap pod of the year. We'll put out another pod soon. We'll have our good friend Scotty G on our podcast soon. He just got a mic, so shout out to him. I know we've been waiting to have Scott on for a little while, so definitely looking forward to that. But yeah, as I said earlier, definitely give us a follow on social media at Roth Podcast. We'll give you a follow back on Twitter or Instagram, whatever floats your boat. Love posting clips on there and interacting with our fans and our listeners. Fans, I mean, you guys are our friends. Really, that's how I see it. A listener is a friend of mine. So most people that listen to this podcast, you know one of us, at least me or Donnie. And if not, let us know. Like, we want to talk to you guys too. So it's good stuff. Definitely give us a follow on whatever platform you're listening to, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, or YouTube. We're on all those platforms, so we'd love to interact with you on any of those, whichever you guys like getting your podcast through. So it's good stuff. Really do appreciate everybody for making it this far. As we said, you can give us a follow back, obviously, as I've been saying. But no, it's good stuff. Appreciate you guys all for listening, and yeah, we'll talk to you guys again next week. Peace, everybody.
Yep. Peace, Sheck West. Peace.
Sheck West. Good comms from Donnie right there. I failed. He believed in my ability, and I failed. But yeah, Sheck West, you're coming on the podcast. So good stuff. All right, we'll talk to you guys later. See ya.
Peace.
Yeah. The ones that hate me the most look just like me. You tell me what that means. Make a slick comment and see what that brings. I seen it go down, we can reenact things. Extreme like BMXing. These boys pussy and they PMSing. People in the city see the movement occurring and say, my God, I wanna be in that scene.